It's one of the great mysteries of the ages. A secretive order of knights grows immensely rich and powerful after allegedly finding a treasure in the most sacred ground on earth.
Some people say it was the Holy Grail.
They become very, very seriously rich.
This was gold. It had to be somewhere.
It's not so much a cave as it is an artificial subterranean temple.
I'm on a mission to sort out fact from fiction of the legendary Knights Templar. A quest that leads to some of the most important archaeological sites and breathtaking scenery in the world.
Suffice it to say, this is a secret world.
My life as an archaeologist has taken me to the four corners of the earth, searching to unlock the mysteries of our ancient ancestors. My name is Michael Arbuthnot, and this is Secret Worlds.
You ever wonder what the streets of Old Jerusalem look like? Wonder no more. I like it. What's your name?
Bashar.
Bashar. Thank you. I'm in the old city of Jerusalem to uncover the secrets behind the most legendary treasure in history. The treasure, if it even existed, belonged to a secretive order of medieval knights known as the Knights Templar. During the Crusades, they were based right here in Jerusalem. And somehow, mysteriously, they became unbelievably rich.
According to legend, the Knights Templars' mysterious wealth started here.
This is Jerusalem's Temple Mount. It's basically sacred ground for three major religions and one of the most fought-over spots on Earth.
3,000 years ago, this was the home of a Jewish temple built by King Solomon. Shortly before the time of Christ, King Herod the Great built a second, even larger temple that was ultimately destroyed by the Romans. In the 7th century, Muslims took control of Jerusalem and built the Dome of the Rock here to mark where Muhammad ascended into heaven. Then, at the end of the 11th century, Christian crusaders advanced from Europe to take back Jerusalem, winning the first round in what would be a bloody 200-year struggle. 9 veterans of the First Crusade would go on to form the Knights Templar. What I want to know is how they got started, so I meet with local historian Julie Barretz.
The Knights Templar was an order founded by 2 French crusaders. Even though Jerusalem was fully secured by the Crusader armies, the road leading there was very, very dangerous for travelers. The Order of the Knights of the Templars was founded as kind of a volunteer police force to protect the roads and to make sure that those Christian pilgrims got up to the holy city of Jerusalem safe and sound.
Then what's the big deal? You know, what's the intrigue with the Templars?
Well, a lot of the intrigue surrounding them has to do with their headquarters. Once the Order of the Knights Templar received recognition, they were awarded as their headquarters that building with the black dome that you can see over there known as the El Aqsa Mosque. The El Aqsa Mosque sits on top of the artificially extended platform built by King Herod almost 2,000 years ago. So there's a huge empty space filled with tunnels and subterranean passages right underneath that building.
So that's not natural mountainside right there?
No, it's an extension of the mountaintop.
So the Templar basement was a vast storehouse of God knows what.
If you were looking to hide something really important in Jerusalem, that would be the place. We don't know what was down there, and they probably were pretty curious about it as well, because their legendary digging took place up there on the Temple Mount.
Temple Mount gave the Knights Templar their name, and possibly something else of value. Shortly after the Knights Templar made their headquarters here, the once humble order became incredibly rich. You don't have to look far to find proof that the Templars had money to burn.
So what is this place?
Well, we're now in one of the most ancient market streets of the old city of Jerusalem. going back to Roman times, but it was roofed over by the Crusaders.
Really? Wow.
And let me show you something particularly interesting here. Engraved in the stone of this supporting arch is a T.
T for Templar?
T for Templar.
So they own this whole strip mall here.
Exactly, and then they rented out the shops. And
like businessmen.
And they were totally businessmen in the purest sense of the word.
They weren't afraid of making money.
No, they weren't afraid of making money, and they were deep, deep into the real estate business. But remember, every monk took a vow of poverty. The knights, they weren't rich themselves, but the order was fabulously wealthy.
Wealthy enough to bankroll many of the first great cathedrals, starting with this one, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre.
This is the place where it's believed that Jesus was crucified and buried.
It's kind of unassuming architecture for the heart of Christendom.
Well, wait till we get inside and you see what it looks like in there. So when the Crusaders got here, this church was in bad shape. And one of their top priorities was to renovate it and fix it up and enlarge it, because this is the most important site for believing Christians. This is the highlight of the pilgrimage of every Christian that comes to the Holy Land to walk in the footsteps of Jesus.
So this is kind of a hallmark of Templar architecture?
Yeah, if you look around, look at these enormous pillars, look at the Corinthian capitals on top of the pillars, the stonework over the entrance, classical Crusader architecture.
Walking through the church, one finds symbols of the Templars' legacy, including the equal-sided cross, the insignia most associated with the Templars. And although there's scholarly debate over where Jesus was buried, many believe it was here.
So we're in a tomb just off of the center rotunda of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And there's these two spaces you can see, and this is where you would have inserted a sarcophagus or a coffin. We were only a few dozen feet from the place where Jesus was crucified. This is a pretty holy spot.
It's easy to see why the Templars venerated this site. But it took money to build this place. And that leads me to wonder, could the Templars actually have found a treasure nearby? In search of an answer, Julie leads me to one of the many tunnels underneath the old city. Tunnels like the ones under Temple Mount.
Look, there's a lot of secret, inaccessible space down there that had gone out of use after the Romans destroyed the temple and destroyed the city of Jerusalem in the year 70 AD. So theoretically, anybody could have been using that place to hide their most precious, important objects for hundreds of years.
Wow. This is amazing. Where are we?
We're in a cistern. This is a piece of the Bethesda pools, which were huge reservoirs used at the end of the 1st century BC for the temple.
How long were the Knights Templar tunneling beneath Temple Mount?
They were up there in the neighborhood of 60 years until Jerusalem fell to the Muslims. Some say they were looking for the Holy Grail. Some say documents attesting to the fact that Jesus survived the crucifixion. I think, though, the most intriguing treasure was the Holy Ark with the 10 Commandments inside.
The Ark of the Covenant.
The Ark of the Covenant.
Well, why would they have reason to believe that it was under Temple Mount?
Well, the Ark of the Covenant stood in Solomon's temple. And sometime around the destruction of Solomon's temple, 586 BC, the Ark disappears.
And it just may have never left Temple Mount.
Very possibly.
On October 2nd, 1187, Muslim armies took control of Jerusalem. And at that time, the Templar had no choice. They had to evacuate their headquarters on Temple Mount, never to return.
Could the Templar Knights have secreted out priceless treasure from the Holy Land? It's a question for the next stop on the Templar Trail.
I've been waiting for this moment all day. All right. One shekel?
I'm in Jerusalem.
It's got room for expansion, too.
Following the path of the Knights Templar, an order of fighting monks headquartered here in the 1100s. If legends are to be believed, they found incredible treasure buried beneath Jerusalem's Temple Mount.
Over the years, people have speculated that the Templar treasure included everything from the Ark of the Covenant to the Holy Grail to secret documents about the bloodline of Christ and even a mountain of gold.
Gold which may have funded their massive building projects. At the height of their power, the Crusaders had more than 50 castles to defend the Holy Land. And today, Israel is studded with the remains of their outposts. But as they lost forts to much larger Muslim armies, they retreated to their last and greatest base, the port city of Acre. If the Templars moved any treasure out of the Holy Land, it would have most likely moved through here. Today, the city is called Akko, and the Crusader compound lies under a massive citadel recently excavated by archaeologists.
This big, beautiful courtyard I'm standing in didn't always look like this. Not long ago, it was completely filled with rubble, because after the Crusaders left, the Ottoman Empire arrived, and they just pushed all of the superstructure debris down into the space. Let me show you something. See this big wall of debris right here? This is actually unexcavated portions of the citadel that we're in. This is what the courtyard looked like before it was cleared out. It took over 400 people several years to clear the space out, but interestingly enough, all that rubble having been tossed in here actually preserved the courtyard very well. This place is over 800 years old.
Israeli archaeologist Robert Kuhl has excavated this and many other Crusader sites.
The wealth of these orders is amazing. If you look at the dining hall, you can get a good example of how wealthy these people were. The dining hall was the center of life in the compound, and people would like to impress their visitors.
I feel like I could be in Western Europe. I mean, it looks like Notre Dame Cathedral. It feels so Gothic, and yet here we are in the Middle East. It's very different than traditional architecture here.
You're right, it was a reception point for pilgrims.
So archaeologically speaking, what was the biggest surprise during the investigation here?
Let me take you.
All right.
I've been to hundreds of archaeological sites, but I wasn't prepared for this.
What we have here is a huge 3-level toilet system.
Did he say toilet system?
Like here you had toilet seats, and above us was another level with toilet seats. And it all flowed through an elaborate system of pipes and reservoirs that collected rainwater and flushed everything down. Nothing comparable exists in Europe at that time.
That is amazing. I mean, it's like an industrial strength bathroom here. I mean, everybody came here and used this thing. You've got how many seats? 1, 2, there's probably 20 in this room alone.
Yes, you were never alone here.
Yes, there was no partitions between the seats?
Just like in the Roman period.
Yeah, it's a social event.
Yes, this was really the big surprise, of course. We understood there was a medieval city here, but we did not understand how well it was planned. They surely did not think they were going to leave this place.
Much of Acre fell in a single day, but Robert believes the Templars had a secret exit plan to ensure that they and their treasure made it back to Europe.
30,000 people. They had to get out. One of the ways was this one. Look.
Look at that. So it's like a secret passageway that could have been used as an escape route.
Yes, the only way out was to catch the last ship to Cyprus.
This amazingly preserved network of tunnels was discovered only a few years ago, after a local woman complained about a blocked sewer.
This is a tunnel 300 meters long, which connects the harbor area and goes straight to the Templars' quarter. The Templars had a huge tower, which was called the Treasure.
They actually had a treasure tower?
Yes.
So when the Templar finally flee Acre, they probably take their treasure through this tunnel to the harbor, loaded on ships, and then they're heading to Western Europe.
Yeah.
I wonder what Robert believed was the real source of the Templars' wealth.
I think the real treasure was this vast banking account system they had. Money, valuables, precious things, possibly deeds. This was their real treasure.
In April 1291, the city of Acre came under siege, and the last place to fall was the Templar stronghold. They actually held out for 12 days. Now, some say they were all slaughtered, but others say that they came here, boarded ships, and headed back to Europe.
Immediately, of course, they became very powerful and influential with all the rulers of Europe. Most of the wealth and the organization of the Templars was concentrated in France. So the French king had a huge stake in the Templars' wealth.
Wealth that would lead to the Templars' grandest achievements and to their destruction. I'm following the trail left by the Knights Templar and reports of a great treasure that went missing under sinister circumstances. After losing the Holy Land, the Templars remained a force throughout Europe. They had lost their original purpose, but they still had their wealth, and their biggest stronghold was here, in southern France.
This part of France is completely beautiful, and it's a wine-growing region, so there's these vineyards that just stretch into the horizon. We're looking for this little village of Uzès. I think it's this way. We'll see. Oh my God, that is beautiful. This is classic old Europe.
Some structures in the village date back to the day when Templars walked its streets. And it turns out, the Templar Trail is a great way to practice the international language of architectural appreciation.
Not this one, but the other one. And you can see the big duché. And this is a kind of castle. Don't you show me? Duché. I can, I don't have time.
Oh, okay.
I'm very speedy.
Of course, walking with your head up to admire all the scenery does have its risks.
I got some little shrapnel, but it came from a French dog, so I feel much better about it. Bonjour. Bonjour. Well, look at this.
Fortunately, the street has more appetizing sights.
It's like a really thin pancake. Oh, it's delicious. Ah, merci beaucoup. That's very good. It's delicious. It's not too sweet. It actually tastes like chocolate chip pancake.
Recharged, it's time to go back to the trail of the Templars and their legendary treasure.
Hi, James.
Good morning. Good to meet you.
Author James MacDonald is an expert on the Templars.
So the Templar get here, and they're not dealing with pilgrims, they're not dealing with crusade issues anymore. What do they do once they're here?
A lot of it is managing their wealth. During their stay in the Holy Land, they've started essentially what has become banking. They invented what we now know as a check. They were the first multinational corporation, and they owed allegiance only to the Pope. So wherever they settled, they were effectively immune from all local laws, all local taxes. Because they owe their allegiance directly to the Pope, nobody else has a great deal of influence over them. So there's resentment all around, but probably the greatest is from Philip the Fair. He's the King of France. He's already run out of money several times. He had huge debts with them. That probably puts ideas into his head.
It seems King Philip would like nothing more than to eliminate the Templars, in turn eliminating his debt. But first, he must influence one of the Templars' most important allies.
The Pope. Nowadays, the Pope is based in Rome. At this time, the Pope is based in Avignon.
All roads lead to Avignon?
All roads lead to Avignon.
Avignon is known for its palace of popes. I'm hoping it can lead me closer to the Templar treasure, because what happened there puts a shocking twist on the Templar story.
I'll tell you, one of the challenges to getting around out here is, well, first of all, street signs aren't in English. How dare they? But there are roundabouts. Every few kilometers, you've got to take a circle, and if you don't make your turn, you're off a different direction, and it can be a little tricky to find your way. I am now lost somewhere in the French countryside outside Avignon, but if you're going to get lost, this is the place to do it. We're in the French wine country.
Fortunately, although I can't read the French signs, all roads eventually do lead to Avignon. In the 1300s, a series of French popes wrested control of the church from Italy. Pope Clement V moved the papal court to Avignon, and his imposing palace still dominates the city. To find out what happened here, I meet up with Laurence Magon, who shows me around the Pope's modest home.
15,000 square meters, 17 years of construction. 20 people maximum used to live here.
20 people.
The Pope, servants, a few doctors. That was the biggest palace in Europe in those days.
Seems the Templars weren't the only ones with money.
This is the great dining hall that was used for special events only.
Like perhaps having the country over for dinner? And if you like a roomy kitchen,
It was possible to roast 5 whole cows at the same time.
That's a hell of a barbecue.
Yeah, that's right.
See this little marking here? This is actually a stonemason's signature. Apparently the stonemasons were paid by the block they laid, so they wanted to make sure they got credit for it. They'd etch in their little markings, pay up.
while the Pope's living quarters are impressive, it's what happened behind these walls that I've come to find out.
So at one point in time, the Pope and the King are right here in Avignon.
The king was not living very far. He was living right on the opposite side, on the opposite river bank over here.
How convenient for King Philip, who's trying to tarnish the relationship between the Pope and the Templars.
He started accusing the Templars of sodomy, heresy.
So he's influencing the Pope then?
Yes.
Against the Knights Templar?
The problem is that Philip the Fair lied.
So basically trumped up allegations based on nothing.
Yeah.
He sent agents throughout France to arrest the Templars. That was Friday the 13th, 1307.
And all across the kingdom,
Yeah.
the Templar arrested that night.
Yeah.
With the Pope removing the Templars from his protection, the Knights were put on trial in Paris. If you're going to be put on trial, why not Paris? Ironically, this is the home to some of the Templars' most lasting monuments.
Notre Dame is probably the most famous cathedral in the entire world. But I think most people don't realize that many churches and cathedrals across Europe were actually built with loans borrowed from the Knights Templar.
The last Grand Master of the Order, Jacques de Molay, has his own memorial marking a sadder fate.
After their arrest on Friday the 13th, the most prominent members of the Knights Templar were brought here, where they were tortured into confession. Only after being subjected to the worst imaginable torture did the once favored Knights Templar finally confess to a host of unfounded accusations. Many people in Europe at the time didn't believe the charges. They knew it was a political smear campaign. And in fact, Jacques de Molay recanted his confession on the day of his sentencing. This angered Philip the Fair so much that that very day, right here, Jacques was burned at the stake. Now, the legend goes that as Jacques de Molay took one of his dying gasps, he called out to the Pope and to King Philip and said, "Within the next year, you will have a tribunal with God." And interestingly enough, within 12 months, both men were dead.
King Philip seized the Templars' estates to pay off his debts. Yet the Knights' religious relics and vast stores of gold were never found. But as with all things Templar, their story has a long way to go.
Well, this search for the Templar treasure has been exhausting. It's a tough job, but some archaeologist has to do it. I wonder if the croissants were this good back in the 14th century.
While Philip the Fair never did find the Templar treasure, he may not have been looking in the right places. Could an ancient hilltop castle be holding more than ancient stones? I'm on the trail of the Templar Knights and their mysterious lost treasure. I've made it as far as Paris, But one of the most curious stops in the trail is back in southern France, in a remote hilltop town called Montségur.
This is one of the most picturesque places I've ever been in my life.
Montségur was the last refuge for a religious group called the Cathars. Like the Templars, they were persecuted by the church, and according to local legend, the Cathars may have helped hide the Templar treasure. But I'm told getting to their final outpost may require a little extra work.
So we got quite the hike ahead of us here. It's gonna put my legs to the test.
Kinda sorry now I had that second croissant. The Cathars came here to escape the wrath of the Pope, who branded them as heretics and condemned them to death in the 1200s.
Painful as it was actually well worth it because it's a beautiful winding trail. We're at the entrance right here, the gate. If you turn and you look this direction, you can see the view that the Cathars had. Now that is a view.
But the view wasn't the only reason the Cathars built here.
From a strategic standpoint, you've got a view of everything in sight.
Which is a great defense for possible invaders. But ultimately, it wasn't enough. In 1208, they were attacked by the French army.
There's an invading army to the south trying to make their way up, the only reasonable access point, because this direction to the north is a sheer cliff. No way up, no way down.
And here's where the legend comes in.
Late at night, under the cover of darkness, two Cathar women sneak out the back door, carrying valuable documents, treasures, and in a death-defying feat, nothing short of a miracle, they descend this cliff. The story with regards to the Templar is that they entrusted some of their treasure to the Cathars, and that perhaps these women, when they made their escape down these cliffs, had with them some of the Templar treasure, including, it's rumored, the most famous relic of all, the Holy Grail.
Even if the Cathars got away with some of the Templar treasure, where did it go from here?
Well, we've been to Avignon, Paris, Montségur, and we've hit a dead end. At this point in time, historical and archaeological information is gone, and we're relying ostensibly on legends. So I think at this point, probably the best thing for us to do is to go see James MacDonald again and see if he can point us in the right direction.
Appropriately enough, we're meeting up in an old Cathar church in the village of Alet-les-Bains that's been called the most beautiful ruin in France.
This used to be an abbey, and then it was turned into a cathedral, but it's been ruined for a couple of hundred years now.
Spectacular. So we were just at Montségur, and I heard a very interesting legend that the Cathars actually were in possession of the Templar treasure.
It is true that Montségur was a Cathar stronghold. But the real killer to this argument of the linkage with the Templars is the Templars were arrested in 1307.
Okay.
The Cathars were besieged in Montségur in 1244.
Oh, okay. So we've got a
You've got a couple of generations in between, and it's the wrong way around.
Okay, so we've established the Cathars more than likely didn't have the treasure. But if they didn't have it, who did, and where would it have gone?
Well, there's a legend that the treasure from Paris, which was held in a large castle called the Temple, was spirited away in 2 wagon loads on the day before the mass arrests of the Templars, taken in these wagons to the coast, loaded onto the Templar fleet at La Rochelle, and sailed off.
Presumably for a safe haven somewhere.
Right, for a safe haven.
What place is safe?
Well, not many places are safe in Europe now. In effect, there's an arrest warrant for the Templars through Christendom. There's one possibility, because from time to time in the Middle Ages, whole countries were excommunicated. In 1307, The country that was excommunicated was Scotland. So Scotland is outside the jurisdiction of the church, and the Templars there are safe. So assuming there's a treasure, assuming the Templars did escape, that's where I'd have gone.
Sounds like I have my new marching orders. Of course, I'll miss the French cuisine. C'est la vie. There may be a treasure in Scotland with my name on it. I followed the Templar Trail from Jerusalem across the Mediterranean Sea to France. And just like the Templars may have done 700 years ago, I'm headed across the English Channel to the British Isles. If their treasure did end up there, I'm determined to find it.
Take a look outside the window. See how fast we're going? That's about 300 kilometers an hour. That's 186 miles an hour. So we're moving pretty good. It's a 2-hour run from Paris into London. We're going to go through the Channel, which runs under the English Channel, but it's so convenient and so fast now that you could live in Paris and commute to work in London every day.
800 years ago, there was no high-speed train. But that didn't keep the Templars from the United Kingdom.
In London, there was a significant Templar presence, including the Templar Church, which was more or less an administrative center for them in all of England. Really the most logical place to start is London.
Hey, are you familiar with the Knights Templar?
Second.
The Knights Templar?
Yeah.
Do you know where their treasure is?
Yeah, they buried it years ago. It's in my front room.
It's in his front room.
Contemporary London seems like a world away from where this adventure started, but if you look closely enough, evidence of the Templars are still very much in sight.
You must be Michael.
I am.
Very good indeed.
Robin Griffith-Jones is the master of the London Temple Church.
This is incredible.
Welcome to the Temple Church.
Oh, yeah, thank you very much. It's
Isn't it
beautiful.
fantastic?
It certainly is.
Absolutely wonderful place.
When you walked through that door, you walked out of London, and you're now in Jerusalem. This is modelled on the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where Christ was buried and rose again, and the grave of his own tomb is right in the centre of the Holy Sepulchre Church in Jerusalem, with a chapel above it. So,
yeah.
Standing here, we are, to the medieval mind, absolutely at the centre of everything.
This round church is one of the greatest surviving testaments to the Templar ideals. From its symbol-laden windows to burial plots of 13th century knights.
Just shows exactly what knights were like in the 1220s and 30s. It's, and absolutely, here it is.
Yeah. What was the role of the Knights Templar here in England?
Oh, well, in England, their prime job was raising the funds that were needed for the war in the Holy Land.
There's evidence to suggest that there was greater tolerance to them here in England.
Oh, yes. If you were a Knight Templar, and if you had managed to escape the general arrest on the 13th of October, you would do well to come across the Channel. The personnel survived. The assets, on the other hand, if you're looking for anything like that around London, you should go to Royston. These Royston caves, this extraordinary discovery in the 18th century, and they have been linked ever since their discovery with the Templars.
Caves and treasure always make an intriguing pair. About 50 miles north of London is the village of Royston. Or so I thought.
We're a town of Royston, not a village.
Well, see, I don't think that most Americans know the difference between a town and a village.
It's the town, yes. It's a bigger, and there's more amenities here, whereas in a village, like I live in a village,
yes.
We've got one little post office.
I see.
And that's it. So there is a big difference. So just say it's the town of Royston.
Well, it's not a village, it's a town, but at least we're not lost.
Royston turns out to be a town of about 15,000, and its cave is right off the main street.
This is like a soft chalk wall, and it's wet. But you can see this was completely artificial. This is not a natural cave.
There have been a lot of theories about the origin of this cave. Many believe it was built by the Knights Templar before they were dissolved in 1312.
It's not so much a cave as it is an artificial subterranean temple. You can see this is how the cave was discovered. Somebody was actually digging on the side of the street and punched down. There's almost a sense of information overload in here. It's kind of an overwhelming experience. There's so much.
If the Templars did build this, what does it all mean? And could any of it be clues to the Templar treasure?
Good morning, Mike. Lord Macklin, thank you so much for coming down.
It's a pleasure.
I desperately need expert help.
Lord Christopher Macklin is both nobility and a modern-day Templar.
But you're a member of the Knights Templar itself?
Absolutely, yeah.
Wow, I've never met one. Can you make sense of what we're looking at here?
Absolutely. I mean, the Templars have ancient knowledge, as you know, and I mean, they actually go back 5,000 years. The interesting thing about this cave is that it's a hall of records.
So this is recording events that are particularly important to the Templar?
Yeah, major milestones.
So what can you show me?
Well, clearly, I think you've got Mary over here, got all the disciples here. I think Judas is in between.
Here are the disciples, right along here. And you're saying right here, this face is Judas, set behind, not up with the front with the rest of the disciples.
There's Richard I and his wife, Queen Berengaria, whose crown appears floating over her head. Lord Macklin explains why.
She wasn't formally crowned as Queen of England.
The Christian martyr, St. George, stands next to a symbol said to adorn Templar swords. But it seems the Templars still have plenty of secrets.
The significance of St. Catherine, which I can't disclose today, but she's very significant to the Templars.
I see.
Definitely intriguing, but that's not the real secret I'm after.
Could this have been a storehouse or a place of safekeeping for the Templar treasure?
It was, yes. This was built not just as a hall of records, but also to store artifacts and maybe even hide.
So you're talking about objects that are part of the Templar treasure. You know where they are?
I do.
It's a secret.
It's a secret.
Despite his reticence, Lord Macklin has been allowed to reveal some little-known Templar facts. The Templar seal shows 2 knights on the back of an Arabian stallion.
The front is a Knights Templar. The back is very different. This person here is over 7 feet tall because of the size of the feet. This is called a jinni.
What's a jinni?
In the Islam faith, it mentions jinnis.
Genie, so as in genie in the bottle genie?
No, it's called a jinni. The jinni is a dark entity. It's the bad part. And what it is a reptile-type creature that can transfer from this dimension, which we call the 3rd dimension, into the 4th dimension, which is the spirit world.
Uh-huh.
Definitely not what I expected.
So symbolically, then, what's happening on the seal?
Symbolically, it means you've got the good with the bad.
The good with the bad.
The balancing act between the light and dark.
Well, exactly.
There's just one more thing I'm hoping this Templar can tell me.
So the ultimate secret. Where is the treasure? Well, we've been traveling around the world.
And you will.
Throw me a bone. You know, I've heard stories that the treasure ultimately made its way to Scotland. What do you think?
Well, I think so, yeah. I think you'll learn some interesting things there, certainly.
I think it's in Scotland.
Excellent.
Okay, thank you very much. Be well.
Take care, and you. Take care.
The Knights Templar had a long history in Scotland. Before hitting that trail, I'm going to do some more research, London style.
I'm going to see if anybody in here happens to know anything about the Knights Templar.
We are on a quest to try and find the location of the treasure of the Knights Templar.
Good luck.
So this is the motherland for me. This is the homeland of my ancestors. My last name, Arbuthnot, is a Scottish place name. About actually 2 hours from here, there's a little village called Arbuthnot. So it's great to think about the fact that this is where my ancestors came from.
Now, I don't think any of them were Templars, but if they were, they might have been found at Scotland's most famous Templar site, Roslin Chapel, located just outside Scotland's capital city of Edinburgh. Many believe it's here that one of the Templars' most legendary possessions may exist, the Holy Grail. But before going to the chapel, I'd like to learn more about its relationship to the Holy Grail. Lucky for me, my cabbie is an expert.
The Holy Grail is buried right here in Roslin. And people always spoke about the chalice with Jesus' heart in it.
Jesus' heart?
So it has changed.
I'm getting about every third word. He's saying that there's chambers beneath the chapel.
From what I can gather, here are the facts.
The story here from the elders was that the Holy Grail that contained Jesus' heart was brought to Roslin Chapel and actually buried in the vaults beneath.
This has been perfect. You've given us a lot of great information, and
still got to cost you £15.
Before heading to Roslin Chapel, I'm making a pit stop in Edinburgh to find out if the legend of one of its most famous citizens, Greyfriar Bobby, is true. He was a truly inspiring member of Edinburgh, and the locals have directed me to his final resting place.
It's not uncommon to find grave goods on the graves of important people, but this is a little unusual. This is the grave of an important dog.
When Bobby's owner died, he went and sat on his grave every day for 14 years. Bobby is so revered in Edinburgh, he even has a statue.
Here's Bobby, the most devout canine in all of Edinburgh. Good boy.
With one legend confirmed, I can now move on to the other. Roslin Chapel. It's here, outside of Edinburgh, that some believe the Templars hid the Holy Grail.
Roslin Chapel is one of the most mysterious places in all of Scotland. The bizarre symbolism really can make even the most seasoned archaeologist's head spin. And for many, the symbolism, the mystery, is reason enough to say that this is where the Templar treasure was buried, either in the crypt below the chapel or in one of the tunnels leading from the chapel to the castle in the valley below.
But as it turns out, history pokes holes in this theory.
The chapel was built 150 years after the Templar came here to Scotland seeking safe haven.
Combine that with the fact that the builder of Roslin, Sir William Sinclair, was never known to be a Templar.
But that doesn't mean that a road to Scotland was a dead end.
The nearby village of Temple is named for the Templars, but when the Knights first set up shop here, the area was called Ballantradock.
These are the grounds of Ballantradock. During the 12th century, King David of Scotland granted this land to the Knights Templar. The name is appropriate. Ballantradock means stead of the warrior in Gaelic.
Much of what I've heard about the Templars is myth, but here, we're on solid ground.
Well, this is very cool. This is one of the last vestiges of the Knights Templar here in Ballantradock. This was actually an arched entranceway into what was known as Temple House, and this was the administrative center for the entire Templar order here in Scotland. Now, I don't think they would have buried their treasure on the grounds of their dwelling or their administrative center. Back in the 12th century, if you had valuables, you put them in the church. Now, this is Ballantradock Cemetery. It dates to the early 14th century and was actually established by the Knights Templar themselves. This cemetery is very unusual. If you look at these headstones, they are ripe with Masonic and Templar symbology, like this one right here. You see the skull and crossbones, very much Templar symbolism.
No one doubts that this was Templar ground. But could it also hold Templar treasure? Geologist Antonis Giannopoulos teaches at the University of Edinburgh, and he's brought along his favorite tool for quickly surveying sites.
Antonis, hi. Thanks for coming out. This is quite the nice toy you've got here.
Yeah, that's a ground-penetrating radar, which is basically a device that helps you look for stuff underground.
Have you ever surveyed here?
No, not before. I haven't been to the site before. It's really amazing site.
Yeah, if the Templar came here with a treasure,
They could have buried it beneath this church, perhaps in a chamber or vault of some kind.
We're basically trying to find a very big target.
Bigger is better, for sure.
Yeah.
The ground-penetrating radar should give us a picture of any unusual pockets beneath the ruin.
One antenna sends the signal, and the other waits and listens to any reflections that you get when this signal comes back, if he finds anything which is of a different kind of electrical property.
So I'm seeing some variation in what we're picking up here. Are there anomalies, or?
We have this strong, nice different layer that starts appearing from that point, actually, to where we are at the moment. Whoops, hold on a second, here we go, yeah.
What does that look like to you?
It's definitely a quite significant disturbance there. Can you grab a flag and actually put it down on the ground to see where that is? I think we're doing quite well here. I think we'll find something interesting because it doesn't look that's a big cavity, but it might have been something that had been dug up and filled with something, with other material. It could be some rubble. It could be a big piece that fallen from the roof when it's gone and covered. It doesn't look to me that it's a big chest of gold, which I'm going to come later on and pick up myself. It's not like that. It's not as strong, and it's not as regular either.
So we don't know what it is, but it's safe to say that in this area we've demarcated with these lines, there was something.
Oh, definitely, yeah, there was something there.
And there may still be something.
There could be objects of historical significance here. I expect that there should be. I mean, we need to get the data in the computer and actually trying to see more on this. And I'll let you know if I find something, or I won't keep it for myself.
Well, our journey in search of the Templar treasure began in Israel, and then we went to France, England, and wound up here in Scotland. So it seems that in the end, we are left with a conclusion that's shrouded in secrecy, much like the Templar themselves.
700 years after the Templar Knights were crushed, their legend endures.
The legend of the Knights Templar, the ultimate treasure hunt, is something that's been inspiring and motivating people for centuries. Well, I can't say that I found a shred of evidence that the Knights ever possessed the Ark of the Covenant, the Holy Grail, or any other legendary artifact. But what I can say is that they certainly amassed an enormous fortune. What'd they do with it?
Maybe they did what I do when I travel the world. Spend it.